Hey guys, so someone commented on one of my other videos asking if I would make a video talking about ecstatic dance. This is a comment from someone called Night Butterfly. They say, I came out of the New Age too. I am now following Jesus Christ. I do have a question. I still have this desire to go out dancing. I love to dance, but nightclubs and ecstatic dance just don't feel good to me no more. Could you make a video about your views on ecstatic dance? For me, it is too intense, and also I feel a lot of sexual energy coming off of people. Sometimes it almost feels like tantra on the dance floor. I notice I'm not comfortable with it anymore. Not even dancing like no one is watching because people do still watch, and I feel not well. Now, I thought it would be fun to make a video about this because I have a tremendous amount of experience doing ecstatic dance. It used to be a huge pastime of mine when I was deep in the new age. I would go to ecstatic dances when I lived in the Bay Area, San Francisco, like multiple times per week, 2 or 3 times per week. Uh, I've done ecstatic dances in different parts of the world: Bali, Costa Rica, Burning Man, lots of different ecstatic dancing. It was like a huge, I almost want to say like drug of mine, in the sense that like I was constantly kind of seeking the high that I would get off of it. And I want to talk in this video about 8 things to realize about ecstatic dance from a Christian perspective. So first of all, ecstatic dance, if you don't know much about it, I'll just explain briefly. It's imagine like a nightclub, except perhaps not that dark, and typically there's not any alcohol or open drug use that's taking place, and there's no talking either. That's typically one of the rules of an ecstatic dance. So you're in an environment that is like supposedly safe, or it's at least advertised as being safe, because there's no alcohol, which obviously changes things a lot, right? It's going to be a lot different than a nightclub. And then there's typically a lot of very spiritual people. It's very popular in the new age. People in the new age love ecstatic dance. Um, and so okay, ecstatic dance is like, to me, it's like a gateway drug into the new age, because a lot of people are willing to try it, including a lot of people who are not really that into the new age. Maybe they get taken to an ecstatic dance by one of their friends or something, and so they end up kind of trying it out, and it's a doorway or an entryway into this new age subculture. So 8 things about ecstatic dance to keep in mind. Number one, it leads people into sexual temptation. So this is automatically a problem if you're following the Christian path, because Galatians 5:19 says, when you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear: sexual immorality, impurity, and lustful pleasures. And, not surprisingly, ecstatic dance is a very sexualized environment. That's why it's so popular. That's a big part of why I went to it as much as I did, is because I knew, hey, there could be a chance I meet a girl, or, I might dance with someone on the dance floor and have some kind of like tantric or sensual kind of experience. Um, First of all, I just want to be clear. I don't have a problem with dancing in general. I think it's totally fine if you want to, especially if you're doing it like alone. Like that's a beautiful thing. Like if you're feeling a lot of joy, or there's a song playing that really inspires you, and you want to dance, in your home space or with a good friend, that's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with dancing. Um, the problem with ecstatic dance in particular is that the culture around it is very much a gateway into temptation and different types of sin that are spoken out against in the Bible. Jesus himself says in Matthew 5:28, "But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Now, maybe there's some men or women who can go into an ecstatic dance and not somehow manage to like not look lustfully anyone else. I was not really one of those people. Like when I went to ecstatic dance, I would pretty much always look lustfully at a woman. You know, I'm not saying that that's like all I did while I was there, but it would happen, right? It would happen. That's because I was putting myself in an environment that was very sex positive, very sensual. People very much encouraged to be like as expressive and open and like loose as possible with their energy. and it's a very swirly container. There's just like so much energy that's swirling around an ecstatic dance floor. um, Certainly it would be possible to interact with an ecstatic dance floor without giving into lust, like especially if you went, I know this sounds crazy, but if you did it like blindfolded, which people actually do, people go to ecstatic dance and they like put a blindfold on and they just get like completely like into an internal experience, which I think is kind of cool. Like it's cool in the sense that at least you're not, letting your eyes lead you into temptation or things like that. But okay, so number two, the music at ecstatic dance is often, I would say, very anti-Christ. What I mean by that is the music tends to be glorifying the creation rather than the creator. So there's a lot of like medicine music or tantric shamanic drumming and different types of music that is actually promoting us to go deeper into our flesh rather than to connect to God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So some of the music, you know, it's like, how harmless do we want to believe that music is, right? Do we want to think that like all music is harmless and that it's like it's okay to listen to whatever you want? Um, I don't really believe that to be true. I think music has a really huge effect on our psyche, and it happens in extremely subconscious ways. So a lot of the times, music that we're listening to or that we're dancing to, it could be affecting us or leaving an imprint into our consciousness in ways that we might not be able to fully appreciate on a conscious level. And you know, I've been to dozens, maybe even hundreds of ecstatic dances in my life, and I don't know that I ever heard one song ever in the whole time that was ever like glorifying Christ. So the culture, the subculture of ecstatic dance is it denies Christ. It's turning its back on Christ and promoting the New Age philosophy of like let's all become God. Like you are God, I am God. We're just going to be God on our own, and who cares about that old book and the stories in the Bible? Like that's the last thing on anybody's mind in an ecstatic dance. So um, again, like a lot of things, it's one of those things that potentially seemed kind of harmless. You could look at an ecstatic dance and you could think like, oh, what's the big deal? It's just people having fun. They're just dancing. Like, oh, come on. People just need to cut loose. People just need to express themselves. Like, what's the harm in that? There's all these justifications to kind of like encourage us to turn a blind eye towards any of the potential risks or dangers or downsides to it. And I think it's naive to live like that. Now, whether or not someone participates in an ecstatic dance, that's up to them, right? I don't actually have a horse in the race here. I don't participate in ecstatic dance anymore, and I haven't since turning to Christ because I believe that it does not fit with the Christian path. So that's me. That's my choice. Whatever choice other people are making is that's on them. They're the ones who are going to have to deal with the consequences of those choices. So I don't particularly care whether someone goes to an ecstatic dance or not, but I would say that it would be naive if we were to act like that there are no potentially um, could we become compromised with ourselves, with our own integrity, with our sovereignty, with our you know being like in the truth and connected to God, like could that become potentially compromised or sabotaged by participating in ecstatic dance? I think it absolutely could. And I think it would be naive to believe that that couldn't happen. Number three, ecstatic dance promotes much, very much promotes sensuality, touch, pleasure. It's all about getting in the senses and having a sensory experience. So it's about driving people down into their flesh. Of course, the Bible calls us to go out of our flesh and connect to the spirit, deny the flesh, to crucify the flesh. Now, easier said than done in the sense that we have these bodies that we have to live in. So, of course, we're going to eat food, right? We're going to take care of ourselves. We're inevitably in this life, 99% of us are at least going to experience some form of sexual pleasure in our lives. So, you know, it's not that we're never ever going to be in our flesh in this life. Like, naturally, we're kind of trapped in our flesh and there's not much we can do about that while we're here on earth. So the problem rather is not that we inevitably are going to be in our flesh some of the time. The problem is that ecstatic dance actually like intentionally drives us further into our flesh. It's all about getting embodied and getting incarnated into the body, um, out of the connection to spirit and more in our senses, in our pleasure, in our sensuality, in our sexuality. And I really love this Bible verse. Ephesians 4:19 says, having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continual lust for more. Now, this described me pretty well when I was in the New Age, especially the continual lust for more. I was like never satisfied. I always wanted more, whether it was more psychedelics or more ecstatic dances or whatever. I constantly chasing and seeking another high. And that Bible verse starts by saying, having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality. And so in the new age, sensuality is glorified. Sensuality is like it's made into like a god, like, oh, just embody your sensual side, get into your senses, like divine feminine priestess, like sensuality, like, oh, like sensuality is like a very, very positive buzzword in the new age, which the testament to how antichrist the new age is, because the Bible teaches us to rebuke sensuality. The Bible teaches us to not be indulging in our senses, right? Overindulging. And a big reason this Bible verse is like, it's very wise because it says, why do people indulge in sensitivity? They do it because they have lost all sensitivity. That's the thing. A lot of people, including myself when I was in the new age, are just so bombarded with sensory overload all the time that it's like constantly needing more and more and more and more sensory inputs in order to be able to feel the same amount of feeling that I would have had sometime before. And so when you go into the ecstatic dance environment, you're going into this hyper sensualized environment where people are seeking higher and higher and higher and higher levels of sensual stimulation. And so to me, that's not a very safe environment. And I'm sure if you talk to any woman who's done any ecstatic dance, she would probably tell you that I'm sure most women have felt unsafe in the ecstatic dance environment before. Even some men probably have. And I think that's in part because it's such a drug-like atmosphere with the sensuality, and it's like so intense that people are seeking outside of themselves on the ecstatic dance floor. There's this like very like grabby energy of like, who's that, or who can I dance with, or who wants to do contact dance with me, who can touch me, who can stimulate me, who can tickle my whatever dopamine receptors and give me a good feeling. And that kind of environment, it tends to be predatory, right? Because people are they're not actually feeling whole and content and like completely satisfied where they're at within themselves. And so then it becomes this like, well, let me then open up to the external to see what I can find outside of myself to fill that void that I'm feeling within. And that's a bad recipe for you know I'll leave it to your imagination what can happen when that's the starting foundation. So number 4, static dance typically has a rule where there's no talking allowed. Now, in the context of ecstatic dance, I feel like that rule actually kind of makes sense. You know, it serves its purpose within that container, because then if you have people who start having a conversation like right in the middle of the dance floor, it's going to change the environment, right? So there's a reason why they say no talking. But I highlighted this as something that is actually a negative, because if you can't talk, then it means you can't share the truth. You can't express, you can't like um if something feels off, you can't really speak up about it. If you want to like if you're like me and you're a follower of Christ and you might see an opportunity to share a gospel with someone, well, that obviously wouldn't be allowed, right? If there's no talking. So when there's no talking, it means there's no truth being shared. And so then what ends up reigning when truth is not allowed in the field? What happens in the vacuum where there's no truth? It becomes a devil's playground. Okay, now I know that probably some of my like former friends in the new age who are still in the new age, if they were watching this video, they would think like, oh, he's he's completely lost it, like ecstatic dance is not a devil's playground, he's just brainwashed by religion or whatever they would say. But truth is like that actually is what's going on. Like when you create a container and invite a bunch of people into it and encourage them to be as sensual and as sexual as they can be, and then say no one's allowed to say anything, that's just like it's a powder keg of potential immorality, uh all kinds of stuff. And I've seen a lot of like pretty gnarly stuff go down in the ecstatic dance floor where people are being like preyed on or hit on in a way they don't want, or like traumatized. I've watched people get kicked out. I've watched men have to get kicked out of an ecstatic dance before because they were making women feel uncomfortable and things like this. So um, one way I can, like, I think about it, like, is it an environment that I would want my daughter to go into? Like, would I want my daughter to go to an ecstatic dance? No way. Like, if she's old enough, I'm not going to be able to stop her, right? That would be her choice. But if it was left up to me, I would be like, no way, like, stay away from that stuff. Like, there's ways to have good, clean fun. That's something I'm learning as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, is like clean fun is really underrated. Just going bowling with some friends, or like going to the beach, or like, I'm not gonna make a list now of like clean fun, but the point being is, like, there's ways to actually have a really good time without inviting the demons into the field. And that's what's happening in a lot of ecstatic dances. Is it's a template for, it's like an experiment. It's an experimental playground to see what kind of demonic energies might want to come in and play with us. And no, thank you. I'm not doing that anymore. Number, whatever number I'm on, 6 or 7, 5 maybe. Okay. Number 5, the DJs at ecstatic dance are often running experiments on people. So we can think of, like, if the ecstatic dance is like the church, the DJ is the priest or the minister. Like, the DJ is the all powerful one in the field. And there's a lot of people who are clamoring to become DJs because they want that power. They want to ascend to that pulpit, that place of, like, I'm running the show here. This is my ecstatic dance, and you're all my minions. You're my congregation. You're my little, like, pawns. And okay, so there's plenty of ecstatic dance DJs that are totally like white hat, right? They're not up to anything shady. They're just playing good music and trying to encourage everyone to have a good time, and that's it. Those people are out there. So I'm not saying all DJs are gray hat or black hat, but there are gray hat or black hat DJs out there. And what these people are doing some of the time is they're using their music to intentionally manipulate the energy within the room. Now, we would say all DJs are doing this to some extent, right? All DJs to some extent are trying to manipulate the energy in the room. Generally, we would say for the positive, right? They're trying to just get everyone, like, pumped up, getting them to have a really good time. But I do think that there are some, let's say, black magicians who are performing as DJs. I know this is the case because I know who these people are. And when they get into the room and they're playing, they're getting high off of the power that they have. And to them, these are broken people. They're very wounded and damaged people. They don't have a relationship to God, the Most High. So they're going in there, they're being used by demons to manipulate the energy in the room. Maybe they play like the right combination of songs, or they, create some effect through the music that kind of like scatters people's consciousness a little bit, just a little, like, whoa, like using the music to invoke and invite in demons. Now, this could be taken to the most extreme level, potentially, of using like subliminal messaging in the music and things like this. I don't have any evidence of people actually doing that, but it wouldn't surprise me at all, to find out that people are doing that, because pretty much all of the DJs within the ecstatic dance scene are very heavy into psychedelic use and drug use. I'm not going to say 100% of them, but probably at least 80% of ecstatic dance DJs are regularly using psychedelics or plant medicines. They're altering their consciousness, and then they're trying to figure out, it's a game to them. How can I alter the consciousness of other people who are coming into these ecstatic dance floors? So when you go into an ecstatic dance, it's like, again, the appearance, if we want to be naive, we could say, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with this. This is just people having fun dancing, right? That would be like the naive, like, blue pill way of looking at it, would just be to say that. But the red pill or the black pill way of looking at it would be to realize that experiments are being ran on people's consciousness within these floors. And it's a container that, the container is not being sealed off in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. The container is not being made safe in the name of Jesus Christ. The container is open. It's a free for all. So any energies and any spirits and any people, for that matter, are welcome in to swirl around and to dance with the people who are in the room. Now, the DJs who are, of course, they're advanced in this subculture, right? They've been in it for years. They know what they're doing. And a lot of DJs are, I would say, they're intentionally trying to evoke certain experiences out of the people who are there. And the intentions that people have as DJs in this field, they, like I said, they range from like white, pure, innocent intentions to like dark, secretive, satanic, demonic intentions. And if you're just some newbie who's just like rocking up into an ecstatic dance, you don't know like what the DJ actually stands for, what their intentions actually are, what kind of spirits are working through them, what kind of drugs or psychedelics they might be on or might have been using recently that they're, bringing in the spirit or the essence of that music into the scene. So um yeah, I would just say be careful. I don't think, if you actually care about your soul and your spirit and the condition of your spiritual person, just throwing yourself into these containers over and over again, like I used to do, is, to me, it's unwise. Okay, number six, I kind of touched on this just now. Psychedelics or mind altering substances are very often involved, or not explicitly, but they're going to be like implicitly promoted. Sometimes they're just explicitly promoted. Like where I live in Costa Rica, there's a lot of ecstatic dances that are advertised as being taking place with psilocybin mushrooms, or cacao is very common. Point being is like the new age is like so far gone that they're like testing the edges of like openly promoting illicit drug use at these events, which I find interesting because whether or not you agree with it from a moral standpoint, we know it's not legal from like a legal standpoint. So I always find it interesting that people like are flouting the law to host these events where psilocybin mushrooms or other psychedelics are being handed out to people on these dance floors. But even if you go to an ecstatic dance where there's not explicitly drug use taking place, there are still going to be psychedelics being consumed within the field. I would say like almost guaranteed, at least on like a microdose level. um, I would say probably at least half of the ecstatic dances that I ever did, I probably did it with some substance in my system, you know usually a little bit of mushrooms or maybe like a LSD or something. um, and those substances can enhance the experience that someone is having on the dance floor, which is why they get taken in the first place. But you know, First Peter 5:8 says, "Be sober minded and be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." And so these environments, even if you go into them sober, there's going to be other people in there who are not sober. And ecstatic dance is a little, it's deceptive because it kind of advertises itself as a sober activity because alcohol use is like prohibited on the dance floor. And so it's differentiated itself from the nightclub experience, which is obviously, we all know that like alcohol is being used in nightclubs typically. But when you go to an ecstatic dance, the idea is like, oh, no, this is a safe environment because there's not alcohol. However, it's like the unwritten rule is like a lot of people there are still taking psychedelics. Maybe not even a lot, maybe only 10% or 20%, but that's enough to like for sure influence the container and influence the experiences that other people are having. So, the Bible teaches us to be sober for a reason. It's because we need to stay diligent. We need to stay watchful for how we're being preyed upon or deceived in the unseen realm, the spiritual realm. If there's a spiritual war that's taking place all the time within us and outside of us, sobriety is our ally. Sobriety is our friend because it allows us to be discerning. It allows us to really see clearly what's going on rather than to be deceived, or being under the deception of some kind of mind altering substance. So yeah, I'm personally no longer a fan of these psychedelic positive environments like festivals, ecstatic dances, things like this. I used to be big into them. It used to be like all I lived for was like chasing the next psychedelic adventure, the next high. And I can tell you that I got pretty much nowhere, like it doesn't, there's no pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. There's always just a need to like go back and do it again to try to chase the same high that you had before. And eventually it just leads to burnout. That's it. That's like where you go. You end up burning out when you live like that. I'll speak from experience and just tell you that's how it works. Okay, number seven, psychedelic or ecstatic dance. It definitely encourages and trains people to be like wild and uninhibited. Colossians 3:5 says, "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. So the Bible is saying, put to death what is earthly in you. And ecstatic dance does the opposite. It brings to life what is earthly in you. It's very like Gaia, Pachamama, like earth, rootsy, bass music. Like it's all about like bringing your earth self to life, which is like, feel free to dance by like crawling around on the ground like a tiger, and you can even roar and like let this like most like uninhibited like earthly part of yourself out. And that's just, it's completely against what the Bible, like how the Bible instructs us to live. The Bible is saying that we're to put to death what is earthly in us, because we're not of this earth. That's the key. If you're following Christ, like the earth is not our home. Our home is the spiritual home where our Father in heaven, Jesus are at. So we're trying to cut cords with the earth. Even though we're here in the earth and we're in this flesh vehicle, we don't want to drill down even deeper into the earth to become more earthly. And this is what ecstatic dance is like. Very often you'll see the plant cacao, which is like can be made into chocolate, being served in conjunction with ecstatic dance. And this cacao is like, it's a very earthy um, plant to drink, and it's extremely popular in the ecstatic dance community, because when you're drinking cacao, you're you're preparing yourself to have more of an earthbound experience while you're doing ecstatic dance. And to each their own. Like if that's what you want to do, far be it for me to tell you that you shouldn't or whatever. But um, if you're trying to follow Christ, if you're trying to follow the narrow path, if you're trying to follow the teachings of the Bible and base your life based on God's word rather than your own sensual indulgences and pleasures, then we want to be less earthly. We don't want to indulge in earthly things, because it brings out in us sexual immorality. It brings out in us impurity. It brings out in us passion and desire, and it arouses us, and it trains us to be like wild. And you'll see this a lot in the new age, and it's very often the men that are encouraging the women to be like this, because the men, the sexual predators who are men in the new age, want women who are wild and uninhibited, and letting their armpit hair grow out, and they're just like completely off the deep end of being like ladylike, and they're just turning into these like jungle women who are just like preying around like jaguars or whatever. And there's a reason why that's encouraged, right? It's because men want to prey on women like that, because it makes them more impressionable, naive, susceptible to sexual encounters and things like this. So I would say stay away from it, because when you're creating all these soul ties through sexual immorality, when you're getting in your flesh and having all of these sensual experiences and making all these connections with people, and brushing up against people, and suddenly you're touching and you're exchanging energy with people, and the whole room becomes this swirly, like almost orgiastic experience of like everyone's like in the same squishy container and we're all just exchanging energy. To me, I'm just gonna be completely honest with you. To me now, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Like when I look back on it, I'm just like, that's so gross actually. Like, why would I want to go into a container that's inviting in demonic spirits and exchange energy and swirl around with everybody in there? Like, I would rather be very hygienic about my energy, where I'm keeping my energy pure for God and keeping myself clear of other people that might cause it to become impure. This is why, if you watch my other videos, I preach semen retention and celibacy and all these ways of purifying ourselves for God, so that we don't have to be unclean and living like pagans and heathens here on this earth, which is exactly what ecstatic dance encourages people to be. Last one, number 8. Ecstatic dance is a very positive environment for sexual predators, for narcissists, for immoral people of all kinds. The winners of the ecstatic dance um, environment, the people who come into that container and extract the most energy out of it, besides maybe the DJs who are getting paid something to do it, are the sexual predators, the people who are going in there. They're sophisticated sexual predators. They might be narcissists. They might be sociopaths. Point being is they have they're not coming into it like in the Bible. We're commanded to live like children of God. We're to be as innocent as children. These people are not innocent. They're not going in there with innocence. They're going in there with very dark spirits, heavy demonic influence on them, tons of sexual partners that they've had in their past, and they're going in there and they're looking for their next partner. And so it's a very predatory environment. Even if only 5 or 10 or 15% of the people in there meet the criteria that I just described, like that's enough to like really, really, really pollute an environment. You know, like if you take a glass of water and put like one drop of ink in the water, the whole water just turns black, you know? And that's what like a sexual predator or a narcissist or someone who's really immoral or satanic can do to an environment like this. It might be like a really pure container, but you just put one or two people in there that are like very manipulative and they're very charming and they know exactly how to like seduce women or seduce men or whatever, and they're intentionally running black magic. That's the thing, is like these containers are experimental. That's the biggest thing you have to understand about an ecstatic dance container. It's an experiment, okay? And so people are going into that experiment as sorcerers, as magicians, as witches, as shamans, and they're running energy. They're running energy in the field to see like what can I do? What can I get away with? Can I get that naive, like impressionable 20 something girl who's at her first ecstatic dance? Can I get her? Can I rope her? Can I lure her in and get her to like swirl around with me? And suddenly, you know, she starts to forget like who she is or where she's at or like what she stands for. And like her inhibitions start to go way, way, way down. And next thing I know, you know, whatever. Like that's what's happening in these fields. I never was quite that predatory myself. You know, I was more of the naive kind of person of showing up and thinking like, oh wow, this is fun. You know, like I love to dance. You know, I was very like juvenile when I was in the ecstatic dance, but I can say for sure, looking back in hindsight, that there are a lot of people who they're not naive, man. These people are not, they're sophisticated apex predators that are going into these fields to prey on women or to prey on men. Maybe they're trying to run some black magic. They might be trying to drug someone, you know, lots of drug use happening before and after the ecstatic dance experiences. So you know, hey man, if you want to play around the devil's playground, you're gonna have to deal with the consequences of what happens if you do that. And maybe nine, let's say like even if like you go to like 9 ecstatic dances and you have a positive experience, that doesn't mean that the 10th one you go to won't be like really bad, you know, like horrifying, traumatizing. You might like meet someone who like makes you wish you had never left the house that night, you know, like I'm not trying to like, it's not about promoting fear. I don't want to scare anyone, but I would just encourage people like use your discernment. Like when you're participating in ecstatic dance or plant medicine ceremonies or yoga retreats or any of these new age offerings that they sound so good, right? It's like, wow, it sounds so fun. It sounds like just what I need. Like just realize that on the other side of that transaction is someone who's running a experiment. They're running a manipulation tactic and they're not leading you to the truth, right? Because if they were leading you to the truth, they would be teaching you about the word of God. They would be teaching you about what the gospel of Christ and how he came here, lived a perfect life, died for our sins so that we could be redeemed and we could go to heaven through our belief and our faith in him. That would be somebody who's like actually got your back if they were saying that. But you're not going to find anybody teaching you that at an ecstatic dance. They're going to be leading you somewhere else. And so if they're not leading you to Christ, where are they leading you? Right? And that's the thing with the new age is it's a whole community of the blind leading the blind. It's people leading each other astray, mostly unknowingly, but sometimes people do know what they're doing. They know the truth. Do you think the demons don't know that Jesus is Lord? They know, man. And so people who are sophisticated spiritual predators who are possessed and working for satanic energies, they know Jesus is Lord. They just don't want you to be led in that direction. They want to lead you somewhere else. They want to lead you into Satan's kingdom. And so that's where all these, you know, tantric sensuality, you know, psychedelics and all this stuff that feels so good and it looks so good and it's like so amazing. It's all designed to cause you to fall away from God, which eventually becomes a problem for you. Whether you believe it or not, it does. So uh, you can listen to me and take my word for it, or you can go figure out the hard way and learn yourself, like I tend to do. So, yeah, either way, the last thing I'll say is if you watch this video right here, I talk a lot more about things going on in the new age and how it's really the blind leading the blind. And that's scary because we ought to be concerned if we're subscribing to and we're following people who are blind and we're also blind and then we're all just leading each other and following each other around. That's really bad. We don't want to do that in this life. So try to come to the truth, try to come to the light, and watch this video here and hopefully you can get nudged along in that direction a little further. All right. God bless you. Take care.